his gorgeous photograph. With his gorgeous photograph behind him. How many do we have online now? 20? Okay. I know I don't have that many images in the competition, so I shouldn't even be here, Henry. So, but the critiques are beneficial for everyone. That's why I'm here. Just a few dates to keep in mind. We do have Tom's story next Monday, so we have back-to-back meetings. They all kind of fell on all of the Mondays here. So Tom's going to be presenting next Monday on the 5th, and we will be in person again. I think Tom's planning on presenting. Yeah, I saw Kim with her fingers crossed. I think Tom is planning on presenting live at the Goggle Works next Monday, so that'll be nice to have some actual live speaker again. And also make sure that this is on your schedule. Clear your calendar. December 19th is our annual membership meeting, which is where we elect officers, we plan for next year, and we talk about what we want to do moving forward for 2023. I can't believe it's already time for 2023 again. Kim, you also have a second Santa shoot. Did you want to?
Yeah, that popped up, and we desperately need everybody's help, whoever can help. We have it on the 10th. That's at Boscov's North in the auditorium. And then our Santa got things a little confused and thought we were going to the market, but we weren't. So he scheduled for the market on the 17th, which is the following week. And we really need the help there.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of covered for the 10th, but we're not covered for the 17th.
Okay. Well, I might slide into the 17th if you need me then. So. But definitely contact him if you have the 17th available for us.
I already did. We that's all scheduled.
Okay. All right.
Definitely in there.
Can you send something with the dates and times and location?
That'll be in the newsletter.
It'll be in the newsletter.
Okay, just making sure.
It was in the last one, I think.
Was it? Okay. For the 17th?
For at least the 10th, and then the 17th, that's at the market fairgrounds.
Yeah, I don't know where that is, so that's why I'm asking.
Oh, it's in Reading. It's next.
That doesn't mean.
We'll put it in Friday's newsletter.
As I said, I don't know Reading at all, so.
All right.
All right. Well, with that, let's get started. We have the privilege of having Henry Rowan back doing this same evening with us. Henry, many of us know, and I have a nice write-up about Henry in the last newsletter as before, and other earlier newsletters. Henry had run the PA Center for Photography in Doylestown, and many of us exhibited there and at least entered his contest and occasionally got exhibitions there. A major teaching source for photographers all over the Delaware Valley. So Henry, thank you for taking the time and energy to come back and do this again for us. And by the way, I have you set up for next November. So the way this will go tonight, we've picked all the images that had been awarded first, second, third, and honorable mention in the 3 competitions of 2022. Divided into Class A and Class B, nature and pictorial. They went to Henry blinded with 0 initials. I coded them with numbers. Henry ran the process and gave us his scores, and that's what we'll be looking at tonight. There'll be 15 images out of the 16 that got awards that will go to the Berks Photographic Society submission to the Henry Day International Competition for 2023. This year being run through England. We ran it last year. We're allowed 15 submissions. There'll be 16 awards tonight. Henry had to break the tie of 2 honorable mentions, and we'll make note of that as we go through those images tonight. So with that, if you would please mute yourself, I will share my screen and bring up Lightroom, which hopefully you can all see. Okay, can everyone see my
Yes.
screen? Okay. So we're going to start with Class A nature. We'll show the image and then I'll give you the title and the maker, and then Henry can make a comment as he sees indicated. So this is our first image, hanging by a thread, and the maker is Ivan Bubb. Comments, Henry?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say one thing, and that is that I found all the images to be really good. So, you know, when we have a total of, I guess, 64 images, something like that, or 48 images and 16 spots, not everybody can win, obviously. This I thought was a very interesting image. I like the concept. It might be a little bit too much negative space. It just, I think that hurts it a little bit. Cropping it in is something that,
my bad. I messed up. My thumb hit something. Sorry, Henry.
oh, that's okay.
There we go. Sorry about that.
So, you know, I didn't try cropping this to see different variations, but I'd take a look at that and see when you have this much black, it really had, I have no problem with negative space. I use it all the time, but you have to make sure it really, really works. And in this case, I just felt it was a little bit too much. Well-focused image, good concept.
Daffodil's Last Grasp.
I thought this was brilliant. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Who's it by?
This is by Ginny Lodging. It took first place.
I thought this was a brilliant image. The lighting is perfect. The choice to go light on the entire frame was very, very well chosen. It's sharp. The composition is good. The lines are good. It's just a great image. Well conceived, well executed.
Temporary Suspension, Bob Gross.
These are always tough to shoot. When you're trying to figure out what you need to have in focus, it's a decision on the part of the artist. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more depth of field on the web itself, and probably the best way to do that would have been to come in a little bit tighter on it. You could have opened up the aperture a little bit more. By coming in tighter, you would have maintained the out of focus background, and it would have worked. And I think there would have been a stronger focus on the web itself. It's always tough. These are a challenge, and when you get one right, it feels so good.
Ambush Bug by Ginny Lodge, and this took second place in Class A nature.
Again, a beautifully done shot. There were little details in here that really make this work. The texture of the leaf, the hairs coming up, the reflection in the water droplets really adds to this. And when I look at a picture like this, it amazes me that we have this concept of aliens, you know, that's in the movies, and we actually have creatures like this living amongst us right now. I mean, they don't have to be from outer space, and things like this are always fun. Nicely done, nicely done.
Sunrise at Maiden Creek by Ivan Bubb, and this got honorable mention.
When you're shooting Middle Creek, you have to be a little bit careful. This is a nice shot. Middle Creek's very difficult to shoot. And the reason, especially at sunrise, and the reason I say that is you only have the point to shoot at, and you have 150 other photographers sitting there seeing the same thing that you are. So how do you make your shot different? And that's something that you really have to think about with everything you do. I'm going to make some comments about that later. But this is a good shot. You just really, you have to think hard about what's going to make it a great, great shot, and come up with a concept. In my workshops, I talk about Middle Creek because of that. And I have a couple of shots that I really love. And those shots I actually saw in my head prior to going out there. So, think about what you're going to see, how you can photograph it, what's going to make it different. But this is a nice shot.
Robber Fly with Prey, Jackie Henney.
If possible, I would have liked to have seen this a little bit tighter. It's not all that important in my mind to get the edge of the stem. These have to be really crisp and sharp. And this is nice, it's well done. But when you're doing macro at this level, you really have to be careful of camera movement, shutter speed, a whole bunches of different things. It's a very interesting shot, well done. If you're going to continue with the macro, try to get a little bit tighter. Try to get a little bit tighter.
Nat Orgy by Ginny Lodge.
Okay. This is an example of getting closer and working. This is the one thing with insects, as with any animal, the critical thing to get in focus are the eyes. Whether it's a praying mantis or a bald eagle, doesn't matter. Unless you know why the eye shouldn't be in focus, that's your goal. And Ginny nailed it on this one. Again, I might tighten it up a little bit. One of the things also, and I'll just throw out little tidbits as we're going, do not be afraid to crop. It's shoot a little bit wider and crop in. All of today's cameras have more than enough megapixels to handle cropping without any problem at all. So get your shot, then try to move in closer. And if you can't get closer, don't be afraid to crop.
I believe this should be Stalking the Light by Lee Reeves.
This is a nice line shot. The coloration is good. The lighting is good. The problem with Africa, and the problem really that we have with photography in general today, is that things that used to be unusual no longer are. So on any given day, if I were to hit lion shot in Africa on Google, I would be confronted with 88 million different pictures. So when you're doing your pictures, you have to be thinking, what is going to make it different? Why am I taking it? How can I make it different? Now, saying that, I would also throw in that shots like this are memories. And memories are very, very important. They tell us a lot about ourselves, a lot about what we've done. I would always urge people to take memories. But once you get the memory, then work it in. Do something a little bit different. Make your lion shots really stand out.
Reeds of Heaven, Dutch Bagley, third place.
This is a well-seen shot. I admire people that see reflections wherever they go. And I have a friend that just does the most magnificent reflections. Dutch did a nice job with this one. This is, the shapes work with this and the coloration works with this. So it's a pretty shot. I don't think you can, I don't remember what the rules are for submission to your competition. But I probably would have taken out the big leaf in the middle, the singular leaf in the middle. That's just personal preference. And I think it would have been a little bit stronger if that had been cloned out.
So for our nature to answer that, that cannot be removed.
Yeah.
Sundew by Joanne Stam.
There's a saying in photography, get close and then get closer. That doesn't always work. In fact, a lot of times it doesn't work. But in a case like this, you're not really taking a picture of the flower. And nobody, move in tight on this. Look at the designs. If you got tighter on this, the possibilities just open up like floodgates. And extension tubes are relatively cheap. Everybody should have extension tubes in their kit. And just keep throwing on extension tubes until you get in tight. And you don't really need a macro lens for a lot of this stuff. But this needs to you need to get in tighter. Don't show me a flower on this, show me a design. I think it's probably the easiest way to do it. There's a lot of creative potential in flowers. You just have to sort of get into the little world and work through what looks cool on it.
$15, Bob Gross.
Good goose shot. And I like the lines on this, and the patterning. It's a good shot. Again, you run into the competition of everybody out at Middle Creek, and you also have people shooting in Lehigh County and across the Northeast with snow geese. So needs to be a little bit different. This is a nice capture though.
Foggy Sunrise, Jenny Lodge.
I like the lines on the road. The overall feeling, it's kind of an interesting thing. One of the things that I ask myself, and I try to do it before I take the picture, is why am I taking this? And thinking it through. So what I'll do is I'll go and I'll snap a picture like this, and then I'll spend a half hour exploring it. Because the road is very nice, the light's nice, the fog is nice. But the question I would have is, what is this a picture of? And that can be answered, it's a picture of a field and I like fields, and that's absolutely cool. But if you're going to sell it to somebody else, then they've got to be saying, this appeals to me, why? Why does this appeal to you? Is it the coloration? Is it the leading line? Is it whatever? So work those things through in your head.
And that would be it for Class A nature. We'll go to Class B nature. There we go. And this is the first one. Raindrops, a study in pink and yellow by Mia Curran. And this was awarded honorable mention, and it was part of the a tie break that I made reference to earlier for Michael Day.
This is a very nice shot, especially at the B level. When you're shooting stuff like this, one of the points that you have to remember is something has to be in critical focus. And it's generally where you want the person to look. When you're doing this, you're almost always focusing manually. Very, very few cameras will focus accurately. You know, if you're using a macro lens, you can get away with it. If you're using extension tubes, you're not going to get away with it. Manual focus is almost always better when you're shooting macro. And make sure that what you want to be in focus is in focus. So I like this. I think the design on this is nice.
Frozen Teardrop by Jackie Henney.
So this is another situation with negative space that I think overwhelms the picture. I think there's different ways of cropping this. Getting in closer would certainly help. When you're doing stuff like this, tripods are really essential to do the best quality work. If you're not using a tripod, just fire off a whole bunch of frames. Just put it on the highest frame rate you have and just fire away after you focused. And the reason for that is that you will be amazed how far you move when you're taking a picture. If you want to do a fun test, put your camera on a tripod, look at the rear LCD screen, increase the magnification to 10x, and then press the shutter button to see what the rear screen looks like. And you will see it wobbling all over the place. So shots like this, you want a tripod, and you either want to use the timer on the camera, or better yet, a remote shutter. And some of the remote shutters now that use the cell phones, Pluto makes a trigger, and I just absolutely love it. It's the best way to go about working. So think about those types of things. Camera focus and camera stability are the keys to making these shots work.
Lotus by Karen Lay. This got second place.
Yeah, very nicely done shot. You know, I couldn't see the data on this one, or maybe I could. I don't remember exactly. But it's nicely focused. It's nicely composed. The background is handled well. You get a sense of it without it dominating. Just a very nicely constructed shot.
Sunset Tulip by Mia Karen.
Well executed. If you're already this close, you're basically in abstract mode at this point. So what you want to do is perhaps look to be more abstract, so that you have your viewer wondering. They're going to know it's a tulip in their mind, but you want to show a different part of the tulip. And you got most of it right here, but I'd say go in even closer. Look for more detail. Look for the flow of the lines, and look at it as a source of an abstract piece of art that you can create with the camera.
Light Years Away by Brian Hare.
I honestly didn't know what to make of this, because I think it's a lovely image. And it appears that there's a face in it. It was very interesting. I couldn't figure out how it was done, or if it was a face or just whatever. But it was a very interesting image. It's one also that may benefit from a little cropping and getting the focus a little bit more on the lighter areas. you know, and obviously it's a tough shot. You know, if you did this, however you did this, you did a nice job.
Feathers flying soon. Mia Curran.
Again, I'm going to say the same thing. Going closer, going closer. The background basically, when you have a background like this, what you're doing is you're taking a picture of a flower. Now you might want to do that. If you're doing a field guide book, this might be totally appropriate to show whatever this is. I'm not sure what it would be called. But what happens if you now get rid of everything else and you go in and you look just at the center part of this? You get rid of the stem, you get rid of the background. Now you're seeing something that other people don't see on a regular basis. So that's what's critical. What is really important here? Is it the flower or is it the shapes? Is it the color? You have to make those decisions. And this has a lot of potential. Plants like this are great fun. You could spend a long time on one piece, looking at different angles.
Face in the Water by Karen Lay, and this got 3rd place.
Nice waterfall shot, good detail in the water. You didn't blow the highlights, which is very, very common on waterfall shots. There is, on this one of the things, and actually maybe what I'll do is I'll try to remember, we're gonna go back and edit. There's some things that you could do to increase the impact of the images without doing a whole lot of work. And if we have time later, we'll just go over some of those because it's really simple. There's ways to do it, and you'll see that this could pop a lot more. But it's a nice waterfall shot. The shutter speed is good. There appears to be a dust spot in the lower left-hand corner, which should probably come out before it's submitted. Everybody gets them, you know. The thing you don't want to do is you don't want to leave them. But it's a nice shot.
Woodland Vines, David Lobel.
There's 2 things that you have to remember. One is that you really need a subject in the picture. And in compositional terms, it's referred to as the figure rather than the subject. And the foreground and the background are just referred to as ground. It doesn't really matter which they are in the front or the back. In a picture like this, everything is ground. There is no figure that I can identify that I should be looking at. So pictures that only have a figure generally don't work. Pictures that only have a ground hardly ever work. The other thing, and I wanted to bring this up because there's a couple of extraordinary black and whites coming up. Now that we are less COVID adverse, try to get to galleries and see what the really, really, really good printers do. Okay. Don't look at black and whites online. It's all just garbage. When you look at an Ansel Adams image online, it is nothing like what you see in real life. So I urge people to go to galleries with some of the old masters and see what is capable of being produced in black and white. And it's an important lesson,
Balancing Act by Mia Curran.
Okay. This time Mia got closer and it works better. The question I had, the problem I have with this is the varying focus. It's a good shot. You know, the tips on the upper left-hand side are in focus, and the background seems to be in focus, and parts of the flower going down to meet the background aren't in focus, So I'm not sure exactly what's going on here. And it throws me a little bit. Visually, it throws me. Again, when you're shooting things like this, spend time, work your way around the image, because it looks like there's some really cool stuff on the right side of this that would be a good shot too.
To love beauty is to see the light. Jackie Henney, and this got first place, Class B, Nature.
This is very, very well done. The colors are great. Shooting dragonflies is a major PIA, and this was well done. Very nicely crafted image. It deserves to be first.
Sunset, Karen Lay.
It's a pretty sunset. Again, you have to ask yourself, what's going to make it different? Why does somebody want to look at my sunset versus the other 100 sunsets taken on a given day? So those are the questions you kind of have to ask yourself. One of the things to avoid is, on sunsets especially and sunrises, is centering your sun. Okay, so this is centered left to right. It's not centered top to bottom. It needs a little bit more detail in the foreground. It's a nice sunset.
Red, yellow, green, Mia Curran.
This is very nicely done. It's, we're starting to get more abstract, and I like that as you get closer. Lots of good water. The colors are good, and it's well constructed.
And that's the end of Class B, Nature, and we'll go to Class A, Pictorial. And the first image is Alone at Night, Dutch Bagley.
I really like this image. The thing that threw me on this is the centering of the image. It appears to be too centered. I also think that from a tonality point of view, the island, there's much more detail on the island that could be brought out without impacting the rest of the image. And I think it would create a different aura. Things like on the left-hand side, there's a piece of wood or something floating. The idea to me of a competition that doesn't allow you to take that stuff out is just, to me, it's somebody that doesn't know photography that just has made up a stupid rule. Because the idea of photography is not to take a picture. The idea of photography is to create something. And it's just a pet peeve of mine. And I've sat in on those discussions, and I've also walked out of those discussions. It's just pompous BS. And the thing to remember about photography is that nothing you take is real. Right off the bat, nothing you take is real. Okay? You've captured a moment of time with a particular sensor. If you shoot Canon, it's different than Nikon, it's different than Olympus. You're using a lens that your eye does not mirror. Your depth of field is not the same. So this idea of it has to be what you saw is just a ridiculous concept to begin with. And it hurts an image like this, which could have been made better by a little bit of cloning out.
So just to clarify, Henry, this is under Pictorial, so anything goes.
Oh, okay.
Any kind of manipulation at all for the Nature. The PSA, Photographic Society of America, whose rules we follow, says nothing can be changed, removed. Nothing can be removed from a Nature image.
I know, and I've walked out of PSA meetings over that.
So this is pictorial. Anything
Yeah.
could be added.
Then
or
Dutch, you should have taken that out.
Hot Spring Tourists by Jenny Lodge, and this got 3rd place.
I really like this image. It's a fun image. It's well seen. It's a pleasure to look at. You know, just watching what people are doing. It's well seen. I'm glad she did it in color, in black and white rather. I don't think it would have been anywhere near as good in color. Nicely done.
Harper's Ferry Railroad Trestle, Julie Stauffer.
I thought this was a really interesting image to look at. I really liked it. The tonality I thought was good. And I'm going to excuse myself for 1 second and sneeze. Excuse me. I liked it. I thought it was very interesting.
Antifungal Polarized Photomicrography, Ivan Bubb, and this took 2nd place.
This is a fun image. Compositionally, it's really good. Colors are really good. And it's one of those images that just stops you and says, you know, what am I looking at? And you have to look at this image. You know, it commands your attention, and that's what's so important. If an image isn't commanding your attention, then you probably need to rework it a little bit.
Good Morning Sunshine, Bob Gross.
Nice shot. I like the composition. The color balance is a little bit off on this. I'd take a look at that a little bit. And the horse has gone a little bit to on the green side. Obviously, some of that's a reflection off the grass, but I think that it can pop a little bit better if it's a little less green, because the lighting itself is yellow. So I like the picture of the horse. I think it's a good, nice shot.
Beth Shalom Alzia, Dutch Bagley. This got 1st place in Class A pictorial.
This, I think, is a brilliant black and white. The composition is good. The tonality on this is spectacular. The highlight above the roof line really adds to it. The textures are great. Wonderful image.
The Boat Launch, Ivan Bubb.
This is an image where I like the infrared. A lot of times infrared works, sometimes it doesn't. But for infrared to work, you know, you've got to have something that's really unique. This, you know, it's a picture of a park, which is very nice. Turning it into infrared doesn't really add anything to it. So, you know, the subject matter matters, whether it's infrared or whether it's regular, is what I'm trying to say. And if this wouldn't work as a regular color image, it's probably not going to work as an infrared image either. So it's nicely done. But really think about what you're trying to say. If you had somebody fishing at the end of the little pier, that would have added some interest. Right now, it's all ground. It's a picture of a park. So when I say that, I don't mean to be derogatory, but what's the figure? Is the figure the bench? Is the figure the lake, the trees? And you've got to be able to identify that. You know, otherwise you have a nice picture. You need to go from being a nice picture to being a photograph.
Valley of Lights, Vince Pellegrini. This got honorable mention.
Well, this one threw me. I really like this. I mean, it's well executed. It's unique. It flows nicely. It's a cool image. A cool image. Where is this?
In Southern California.
Oh, very different. Very different.
Beneath the Surface, Julie Stauffer.
I thought this was a really interesting image. This is the type of image that I suspect would sell very well. It's pretty, it pops. It could pop a little bit more because you're going to lose a little bit in printing. So just be a little bit careful there. It's going to dull down if you try to print this. So pop it up a little bit first. But I love the abstract nature of this. I think it's very, very nice.
Rainy Night by Larry Stamm.
It's a well-captured image. I like the way the lines of the buildings have been straightened and are correct. The heavy dominance of the tungsten light sort of throws things off a little bit from the photographic standpoint. I might look at trying to do this as a black and white because of the heavy tungsten. I'm not sure that you can really clear that up with a color balance change because it looks just too monotone. And maybe that was the intent. I'm not sure. I don't know what the original looked like.
Latched On by Dutch Bagley.
Again, it's a beautiful black and white print, black and white image. The patterns are great. It's well seen. It's well constructed. The lighting is just about perfect. Very well done.
Crystal Polarized Micrography, Ivan Bubb.
Again, a superbly interesting image. I would work with the color on this. The overall effect is a little bit on the flat side, and I think it will pop a lot more with some very, very minor changes and be a much stronger image. But the design and the construction of it's very strong.
And that's the end of Class A pictorial. We'll do the last class, which is Class B pictorial. Peace by Tim Huey.
This is a fun image, and it's kind of a weird image because your eye by nature will go one of two places. It will go to the brightest spot in the image, or it will go to the point that is in focus. So here what you have is you have a conflict between the in-focus water in the foreground and the out-of-focus water sphere, she's a little bit too hot. I think what you'd find is if you toned her down a half a stop, 3/4 of a stop, that you could pop this a lot more than it is right now. Interesting concept.
Oop. Something just happened. Detecting film strip. That's interesting. Sorry about that. Don't know what happened.
It's Lightroom.
Hyacinth Field by Karen Lay.
It's an interesting picture. I mean, the application of a painterly effect works. You know, I don't know what the picture looked like beforehand. I use painterly stuff all the time, but you have to be careful with it. And sometimes it gets, it works on this one. just be careful with, randomly applying the paint programs. Topaz is nice, but you need to start with a very strong picture to begin with and then work from there.
Frozen Tears by Kathy Patelis.
It's I like the lines on it. I like the water running down the cheek. It's in focus. It's a good attempt. And when you're working with statues, which I actually love to do, look a little bit tighter. You don't necessarily want the viewer to know what it is. So it's interesting. Well done.
Selfie Silhouette, Charlie Bevins.
This is one of the few selfies that I actually like. I think it's well thought out, well planned, and well executed. Good job.
Beneath the Pier, Karen Lay.
Good motion on the water. I think that there's probably a little bit better shot in there without the shooting a little bit longer, a little bit further out. It's water and piers is one of those subjects that's been done ad nauseum again. So you have to get really clever with how to make yours different. And it's a challenge. I mean, it really is. But this is well conceived, and you did a nice technical job on it too.
Iinger October, Tim Huey, and this got third place.
As a product shot, it's very nicely done. It's well lit in all regards. Obviously, it's sharp, and you did a nice job of doing this as a product shot.
Refracted, Barbara Kaufman.
I think this has a lot of potential to it. And, if we have a second, I'll show you one of the ways that you can make this better. There's some very basic Lightroom, Photoshop, and they're basically the same controls are almost every program right now. It's a little bit too flat, needs to pop a little bit more, but I love the patterning on it. A lot of potential in this shot. I think you can make this really work well.
Playing the Angles, David Lobel.
I love parts of this, and interestingly, the part that I don't like about it is in the title, and that is playing the angles. When you're shooting architectural things, your verticals need to be vertical, or you need to have a really good reason why they're not. And the way that the walls come in at an angle really hurts the overall image. That can be corrected quite easily with cropping on this particular shot, and I think that it can be a much stronger thing. But as soon as you have doorways or windows in an image, they need to be straight, or you need to be able to tell the viewer or whoever's judging it why they're not. And that's just, photography, architectural photography 101. So anybody that you're going to meet as a judge that has any experience doing architectural photography, as soon as you see those angles coming in, they're going to go, eh! And it's a problem. This is fixable. It's a nice shot.
Black and Blue, Karen Lay. This got second place.
I like this. This is creative, thoughtful. It works. You have a little bit more pop that you can get with this with very, very minor adjustments. And you're going to want to make those adjustments prior to printing this, because again, it's going to print darker than you see. But it's a very interesting shot. I love the fact that you're experimenting. You know, you're obviously having fun, and that's going to be one of my comments at the end, but nicely done.
Washington Memorial Chapel Lights by Brian Hare, and this got first place for Class B pictorial.
I thought that this was well done. It was thoughtfully cropped, and somebody took some time. Maker took time with this. Lighting is good. Focus is very good. It just works. It just works. I thought it was very well executed.
The Picture About Nothing, Tim Huey.
Well, I please don't take this the wrong way, but if it is the picture about nothing, you have to ask yourself, why do I want to look at nothing? And these are the kind of thought processes that have to go in to creating photographs rather than taking pictures. And this is, it's a nicely executed shot. I don't, technically there's some stuff that can make this pop more that I think would be fun. You might want to cartoonize this. Things like this can be fun. And I think you need to play with it to make it a little bit more fun. And don't make it about nothing. It's about something. What is it about? Why are you taking the picture? And then show me why you're taking the picture.
Corson's Inlet at Sunrise, Jackie Henney. This got honorable mention, and in the tie break, it will not be included in the Michael Day competition because we're limited to 15.
An interesting, a nicely done shot. With shots like this, you always want to get closer. You always want, the sun needs to be a little bit bigger. This is just something that just needed a longer lens. Also, you probably want the boat a little bit away from the sun, if you had a version of that. Don't be afraid to take lots and lots and lots of shots, get different positions. It's not like you're shooting film. You could throw away, pixels all day long, and it will serve you well to both bracket and to take a bunch of extra pictures for positioning of things like the boats as they're moving. This just needed a little bit longer lens for the scene.
And that is the end of that series. Henry, thank you so much. And I'm going to stop screen sharing and allow you to do so. Congratulations to those who got awards tonight, and 15 of them will go into the Michael Day competition for 2023.
So what would you like to do at this point, Vince?
If you have time or thought, or if you've done this, prepared for this, if you can show anything on Lightroom that you wanted to show, if you were ready for that.
Yep.
Okay, then if you are, then you can screen share and give us a few thoughts.
Okay, let me. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, what happened there? Oh, here we are. I want to make 2 points before we go into, the actual fixing of a couple of images. And I'm going to use mostly mine for just so that I can talk and people can make fun of my images. The one thing that I really want to urge people to do, and I think this is when you ask, what are we going to do, Vince, with the PCP? One of the things that I have recently discovered is that photography should be fun. And that sounds, obvious, but when you watch a lot of people, it's not fun. They're buying equipment, and the value is having X lens rather than creating something. And I watch people who've been traveling a little bit more. One of the things I've done is I've shifted to a smaller camera, and I found all of a sudden my photography has become much more fun again when I'm not carrying 20 pounds of gear. It just makes life easier, and I can concentrate better. At the end of the day, I'm not dead. So when you're doing photography, have fun, think creatively. If you're out at Middle Creek, what are you going to do differently than everybody else? Those are the challenges that you have. And the other thing is making life easy for yourself. One of the things that I've taken to doing is I have taken to bracketing virtually everything. So I'm not worried about depth of field, or not depth of field, dynamic range in the least. I just put on a high, frame rate, click 3 frames, and I'm done. I don't have to think about it. The only concern I'm thinking about is the image that I'm creating, not the exposure that I'm making. If I've got a solid exposure, I can do anything I want in post. Now, there are certainly times when I will make changes on purpose. I will overexpose, I'll underexpose, I'll do things. But for general walking around, make life easy. Bracket. Just put it on bracket and go boom, boom, boom. Worry about it when you get home. So those are 2 pieces of advice that I have. Let's see, it's not. I have 3 Lightrooms open, so I don't know. Vince, I don't know that I can share.
Yes, anyone can actually share, Henry. There should be a green box at the bottom with an arrow up. It says,
yeah, I'm on that. All my windows have a triangle, a gray triangle, and an exclamation mark in them. Let's see.
I don't know. Jenny, can you help? I just said it's that multiple people can share simultaneously. It was set for 1 person at a time, and you were the only one.
Yeah.
What happens when you hit the green arrow for the share screen?
I'm getting a box that says basic, advanced, and files, and then I've got a whole bunch of things, way more than is open on my screen. And it has a bunch of empty white boxes, and it says Lightroom Classic Unknown with a gray arrow and or a gray triangle and an exclamation point.
Bob, you have any thoughts? What I have under advanced sharing, I have now back to 1 participant can share at a time. All participants have that ability, and anyone can start it. So I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, I can share from my screen, so it is turned on.
It has something to do, this is Jenny talking. It has something to do, I'm just looking this up. Are you on a Mac, Henry?
Yes.
It says here that if you have not, if there is an exclamation mark inside a rectangle, you, oh shucks. There's some special category called screen recordings in Catalina. Are you running Catalina
No, I don't imagine so.
on your on your Mac, or are you beyond that?
I'm beyond it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on a Mac, Jenny, with Ventura, and there's nothing
It
special for me here.
says if you're in a session and receive that error, click the share button anyway, and then a pop-up will appear to open system. Did you get something about the system preferences?
Yes, open system press.
Okay, that'll open, you go ahead and click on that. It'll open your system preferences in a new window, and click on the lock symbol in the lower left corner.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you'll be prompted to enter the password for your computer. Click unlock, and then once the preferences are unlocked, you can click that checkbox next to Zoom US.
Yeah, let's see if that works.
And a prompt.
Ginny, you're wonderful.
All right, you got it.
Yes.
We all know
Hopefully.
that. Thank you, Jenny.
You're welcome.
Does that work, guys?
Yep.
I'm
Go-
muting
good
now.
work.
So let me see if I can move this over here. The most important thing in Lightroom, and actually in any of these programs today, is the ability to control your shadows, your highlights, and your whites. Dehaze is also important. So if I take a look at this, this is how the original image started. And it was a nice gray day just before the rains came. And it doesn't matter, because with 4 controls, sometimes 5, but 4 generally, you can fix just about anything these days. So among the most important controls is the dehaze. You get a little bit of dehaze, and immediately you brighten things up. That has other impacts. The most important place for you to be looking is in the upper right-hand corner at your histogram. And use your histogram. So my histogram right now is telling me that I have plenty of room to bring up the whites. So I just slide those over right to the edge so that they're touching. Many times when you use dehaze, you need to bring the shadows back up to get some detail in them. And I never, ever, 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 ever use contrast, because what I'm using is I'm using the blacks and I'm using the whites to bring in that contrast. If I need to control my highlights, I will often add white like I've just done. And if I have something that blows out, then I'll tone it down with the highlight slider. But this is what it started at, and this is what it's like 30 seconds later. So in terms of some of the images we looked at, to get them brighter and to get them popping more is no big deal. And when I say make it fun, one of the things that you really want to do is you don't want to have to spend 9,000 years learning Photoshop. Unless you really, my approach to Photoshop is simple. It's one of the most complicated programs in the world. And if I'm going to learn Photoshop, I will be dead by the time I learn it all. I don't wish that to be my life's ambition at this point. So I only learn what I need to know. If I need to accomplish something, then I hit YouTube or whatever, figure out how to do it. And otherwise, most of my editing has gotten much, much simpler. So these sliders over here, the dehaze is a gift from the gods. It can also really screw things up, so you have to be tentative and hold back. When you are doing editing, do not play with the clarity or the texture until you have a final image. It is the very last thing that you want to apply, and in general, you don't want to do it unless you have a very specific reason. The biggest thing we see from a judging perspective is over-sharpened images. And you just don't need to over-sharpen them. There's no reason on earth to do it. Let's look at another one. This is just, let's do a reset on this. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do when I get an image like this is I'm going to go in and I'm going to go down and I'm going to straighten my lines. We already talked about lines. So in Photoshop and in ACR in general, there is a transform tool that will straighten things out. So just going through, adding some lines that I want to be vertical. I'm not being very accurate here. And now my image is much straighter. Cropping is not a sin. Never was, never will be. So I'm going to crop this down. Always knew I would have to crop it down. And now we're starting to get a different picture. And this is one that I've never really worked on, but it serves the point. If I look up at my histogram, I have room on the left for black. I have room on the right for white. So I'm going to take the white up. I'm going to take the blacks down. And if we look now, oops, this is what we started with. This is where we are right now. You can see how dramatic the change is very, very quickly without doing much. The point is to make life easier, but to actually do it. I'm going to bring up my dehaze a little bit, which is going to pop the colors. You can also take it down. And, you know, one of the things that you should do is just play. I've never done this one like this, but all of a sudden I'm looking at that and saying, that's more interesting than the original. And it's just tinkering because nobody can tell you really what you like, what your intent is. Let's go back. Okay, so I can bring my highlights up a little bit, but I can bring my blacks over here. I want to bring my shadows up. The shadow detail is really important. And actually, that would be, bring up something from Dutch's. Is Dutch on the line? If not, if you are Dutch, don't get mad. But by bringing up the shadow detail, look what happens to the detail on the island. This is where it was. And a hint of shadow changes everything. Now, in this case, you're either going to want to use a brush in Lightroom or a brush in Photoshop, an ACR in Photoshop. The brush in Photoshop is much more accurate and much easier to use than the brushes in Lightroom. So on a shot like this, actually all my shots, I very rarely use Lightroom to do this. I'm doing it tonight because it's easy to show and I can move quickly from frame to frame. But in this case, all I would do is I take the brush, the shadow, and I'd lighten this and leave everything else alone. And if you do that, it's going to pop. See how much more the island pops off? So the shadow detail is very commonly used on African Americans. It's a great way to build skin tone back up, preventing skins from growing too dark. But that's why when I commented on that, that's what I would use on there.
Henry, if you were to use the new masking tool and pick subject, would that not give you a pretty good selection of those trees?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't need it. The pick subject is, it leaves lines, I can hit it with the brush in 12 seconds. I don't need to do any more than that, really. I just add the original. My way of working is to just go in, and I've got this set up as an action. So it's creating an extra layer. It goes right into ACR. I'm going to choose a brush. Choose my shadows, and that's all I need to do. I don't need to hit the top. I don't need to go through a mask, and I'm done. So yeah, I haven't really played around that much with the new masking tools. And the reason is that Lightroom and Photoshop have gotten so slow that a lot of times I have a 2015 Mac and it's barely running anymore. So if I wanted to spend another $4,000, I might try it. And on hair and things like that, it certainly does work. But that's how I would approach this. I wouldn't go too far. And then just take a look at it, bring it up, reduce the size of the brush, and everything's hunky-dory. And now the picture pops a lot more than it did in the beginning. And that's the difference. With things like this, you as the artist have every right to say, I hate what you just did. I like the way I had it. And that's fine. I'm just telling you what I would do with this, because I think it does pop more with this. The other thing you have to remember is it depends on how you look at your photography. I look at photography as a print. That's my end goal, is to make it into a physical print. The physical print is going to be different than what you see on the screen. So, and it's the difference between reflected light and transmitted light. So on a shot like this, if I was going to print this, this would go to mush almost instantly. It's going to go darker. On every printer out there, it's going to go darker. You're going to lose shadow detail. So you need to pop things up anyway. And when you're working, when you finish an image, what you want to do is you want to save that image, and you never want to touch that image for other things. And what I mean by that is that when it comes time to print it, bring the image back up, make the changes that you need to get it to print correctly on whatever printer you're going to be using. And that will vary dependent on the printer and the paper that's being used. And save that as a file specific for that purpose. So I will have my base file, then I will have the base file with a dash called print, and it will say something like Epson 7000 Canson patina, so that I know what paper it's for, what printer it's for. Okay, it's a different sending it to an Epson printer than a Canon printer. The other thing to remember is that all of those are different than if you are going to be submitting them digitally for a competition. Okay, that will be different as well. So I will have another file, keeping that base file the same, but making the changes so that it appears correctly on a screen. And if I'm going to show it on Facebook, I will then have a version on for Facebook, because the Facebook tonality often makes pictures muddy. So I will make those corrections. And at the end, I'll have my main file, and then I'll have purpose-built files of the same image. And that's the recommended way of doing it. I think that you'll find that virtually any professional fine art photographer uses these days. Something along those lines. This one we talked about. What happens when we look at the histogram? Remember I said this was a little flat. Now the maker may say that this is exactly what they're trying to do. So, and there's nothing really wrong with that. I will tell you that what I'm looking at here on my screen does not look like what Vince showed when he popped it up. This is much more colorful in Lightroom than it was with the Zoom color scheme. The reason for that is very simply that I'm looking at Pro RGB colors. Everything here is Pro RGB. The way I've got it set up, it gets translated over versus JPEG. JPEGs are much flatter images, nowhere near the dynamic range or the color space of the Pro RGBs. So let's start changing things a little bit. Let's take the histogram out to the end. There's your whites. Let's drop back the blacks a little bit. Throw that in. Let's see what happens. Play with the shadow just a hair. Maybe darken it down this time. Bring the highlights back. And that's image, that's the base image. That's the next image. Now, the maker very well may decide, I like my original better. And I'm going to say something that's really important now. As the gallery owner, if I'm looking at that print and I'm looking at this print, this is the one I'm going to choose every single time. Now, the reason I brought it up and presented it that way is your audience is important. So, you know, and I'm not picking on the creator of this. If the creator's point of view is, I like this image, that doesn't matter to me. It simply doesn't matter to me as the gallery owner. I don't care what you like. And I don't mean that hostily. I don't mean that hostily. What I'm doing is I'm presenting your work for the purpose of impressing people and hoping that they buy. And this will sell much faster than this. Guaranteed. So you have to think a little bit about your audience. If you're going to hang this stuff in your house and that's all it's going to be, do whatever you like. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're going to be selling to a gallery, or if you're even in an art show, what is going to be the more likely one to attract attention? And it tends to be the bright colors. You basically, when you walk into a room and there's 80 photographs on the wall, you want somebody to be drawn to your image from across the room. That's what you're going for. That's going to increase your sales, and that's going to increase your prizes and, you know, increase your happiness ultimately. So watch your colors. They can be a little flat. Things like this can get tricky to print. I love these images. These are great images. You know, a little bit more room on this one too. Bring that up, drop that a little bit. And in this case, I think that the original is better. The original is great, nicely done. And okay, so going back to the Photoshop stuff, junk image shot through a dirty window. I like the patterns on it, figuring I could do something in post with it without too much problem. Lots of different possibilities. No time spent whatsoever. That may be obvious, but you can do all sorts of different things. So when you're shooting, look for shapes, look for designs, and worry about the post later. Just get your basic image in there. Especially with things like Boris FX and Topaz, there's all sorts of tricky stuff you can do, but you want to have a good solid image to start. Okay, if you take a simple image like this, again, you can just increase your shadows a little bit, increase the haze, drop the black, pick up the white. And you notice we're not spending a lot of time here. I'm going to use the highlight to bring back some of the detail in the highlight area, but notice I've increased the white. So that's what it starts at, kind of flat, yucky. And that's the change without touching any of the color controls that we have. So I could go in there and I could change the blues, I could change whatever. The point is, don't make your images flat. Let's see what we got. So this is from the Philadelphia Marathon over the weekend. There are all sorts of things going on. Unless you know somebody there, the question is, why are you just taking pictures of runners? To have them, whatever, that's fine. But when I do something like the marathon, I'm looking at quirky stuff. This was pretty much the straightest image I took that day. And, I don't know why I have that one, but this is the final black and white version of that. So, again, especially when you're doing motion, leave yourself plenty of room to crop, because you have no idea that viewfinder is blacking out on you. You're not sure exactly where anything is. Just fire away. And again, it's not a matter of taking a picture. You're creating the image, the motion. You're panning with it. You're having fun, and it's fun sport. We talked about this one earlier. So this is the original image. And we could see we have the lines that are going in here that sort of throw it off. To me, it's problematic. Just a couple of quick perspective changes. And to me, it's now a much more interesting image. I don't feel thrown off. I feel like I'm engaged in the image. Generally, what you want to do is you either want to throw people way off balance, or you want to keep them in balance. When you just sort of push them over the edge a little bit, it creates a lot of visual confusion. And there's a concept that originated with robotics called the uncanny valley. And basically what that says is that you can, if you make a robot, or if you make an animation, we'll use Tom Cruise. In today's world, with animation, you could animate Tom Cruise to the point where 95% or 96% of the time, you would not know that you were looking at an animation rather than Tom Cruise. However, that last few percent that you can't quite get right, the way an eye twitches, a finger moving, little details that we're used to looking at and accepting, those generally you can't animate, and those throw the viewer off. So it's a big deal in robotics as they're trying to figure out how to make human-like robots that you don't want to just push out the window, and it applies visually as well. Okay, we looked at this one. I made some comments here. This is an easy one. This is very close to being perfect, but if you're going to print this, it's going to go dark. See, what you want to do is you want to lighten it with the whites a little bit. Might want to bring back the shadows just a hair. Bring back the blacks. Let's see. Not a huge change, but enough that this is going to print very differently than this. This print, if you printed this, it would be dull. If you printed this, it would be exciting. The blues are going to go a little darker, and that's exactly what you want. Typical, this is motif number 5 in Rockport, Massachusetts. If we look over on the left-hand side and up here, we've lost almost all the shadow detail. It's still there. You just have to pull it back. So you pull up your shadow detail, you can throw in a little dehaze. That's going to darken everything down a little bit again. Pull shadow a little bit further. You'll pull the highlights back. And here it probably changed the blue a little bit. Darken it down a little bit. And so what we're doing, you can see this is a huge difference. And this now becomes the starting point. So this make your basic corrections right out of the bat. Also, right off the bat, do any spotting that you have to do, any cloning you have to do. All of that stuff gets done prior to making really gross manipulations. And you could see that all of a sudden, you know, it's not much of a better picture, but it is, you know, technically it's better. And on something like this, you know, to finish this off, I would clone out this boat. I'd change the highlights in this area right here and over here, and I would darken this down here. So I'd start making little changes. I'd probably lighten up the rocks here, and all of that is getting done via brush. And I'm basically just dodging and burning digitally by changing the colors or the densities of the shadows and the whites and the blacks. And it's really not difficult, and it's an absolute necessity. So this is, if I were to submit this somewhere, I'd expect it to be thrown away. Here, I'd still expect it to be thrown away, but I expect it to at least somebody to say, yeah, at least it's in focus. This shot is the closest I've come to actually getting something that I like out of this stupid boathouse. And it's very, very rare to see a good picture of motif number 5. The difference is that the painters have done a great job with it because they can eliminate all the other junk that's around quite easily. So it's a very famous subject for painters. People take pictures of it all day long, and rarely have I seen anybody that does much more with it than this. So the reason for that is we go back to the figure in ground. If you really thought about it, this is all ground. It's a pretty picture, and that's about it. So you have to be thinking, what takes it to being a photograph? And that's where your creativity comes into play. So, I'm happy to answer any questions at this point, or do whatever you'd like, Vince.
Henry, that was fantastic. Your critiques were gentle and good, And this little exercise you did, I think, really drove home some great points. So thank you so much. Anyone, we can go open mic if anyone has any questions for Henry at this point. I think
This
Go
is
ahead.
Jenny. Henry, you mentioned you were gonna, you had a thought about that water skier. What would you have done with that one? That was a
Oh.
neat one, and I loved that picture. I wondered what you were thinking about that one.
Okay, yeah, thank you for reminding me. So here's the original. And this is very, I played with it a little bit, and that's what I would come up with. And all I did there was I changed the highlights. Okay, so let's look and see what that does. By changing the highlights, I'm bringing down her skin tones. And at this point, this is not where it is. This is too hot here. It's a little bit too hot here and a little bit too hot here and a little hot on her arm. Kind of a nasty fix in general, but it's an easy fix with the highlight tool. The other thing that I want to do is I want the whites to stay poppy. So I'm going to bring the whites up, which brings the water up. And it's balancing this, the whites going up and the highlights going down. And it's sort of counterintuitive, but highlights are not the same as whites. So, and I think I pulled the shadows on this a little bit. The idea was to try to get the focus on the eye a little bit more on the water. Because you basically have two figures going on here. You have the water, which is a strong figure, and the woman who is also a strong figure in the image. And so that's the original, and that's probably where I would start. And I would consider this, if this was my image, this would be the starting point. And then I decide what I wanted to do with it. To me, it's important. Oh,
thank you. That was really interesting. I was wondering what you're going to do with that. I like what you did. Thanks.
Yeah. To me, it's important to get the image initially to a point that I can work with it, where I could see what the potential is. And that's very clear in this one. Okay. So this is the just a straight, oh, that's what I did with that. Okay. So this is the original color image on it. And this was about 7:15 in the morning, maybe 7:20. The sun was still behind, being blocked by the buildings. So it was dark. And it was one of those things where you just say, nah, either it works or it doesn't work. And I got to this point. With it as a color image and wasn't really happy. So I just took the vibrance down at first, still wasn't happy, said, this has good potential as a black and white. And that I did in Lightroom. When I took it over into Photoshop, I took it over as the color image. I didn't do any of those adjustments because I knew that I could do better as a black and white in Photoshop than I ever could do in Lightroom. So that's kind of how I work through those, just to see where I want to go. I have, let's see. It'd be so much easier if I had some idea what I was doing these days. So the entire day, all I did was I moved the camera around. And the idea was, I don't know what I'm gonna get. I'm gonna have fun with it though. And when you start getting images like this, now you start to see different potentials. And all of these are unedited, so they will change. And every once in a while, you come up with something that's decent. And even if you don't, I had a great time, apart from the fact that it was really cold on Sunday. But this is what I'm talking about with creating. And this is moving cameras in the camera in different directions, zooming, you know, not being overly concerned. And ultimately, you come up with a few that are good. And that's how I shoot bike races, car races, because I honestly don't know any of these people. So why should I really care? Things like this is hoots and giggles. That's all this is. And the bottom line is that, yeah, the market for stuff like this is low, and I don't really care. You know, to me, it's fun. And if it's fun to you, then great. So I could take something like this, and the whites are too intense, but that's going to be taken care of with some dehaze, just the highlights, bring up the shadows, bring the blacks down. And now all of a sudden, I don't know that it's any good, but it's different. So the point being there that a lot of these controls, you know, are really simple and give you a lot of different options. And as you start to see what your images could be, and maybe this is absolutely the wrong way to go about this image, but maybe that idea says, hey, if I do it on this image, what happens there? Oh, let's pop the whites. Let's drop the blacks. And I'll see if I can find it. Actually. No, actually, so I did that already. But something like this, for example, all of a sudden, you know, I didn't really notice this person just standing there. And I've decided that I like it. It changes what it is, what the image is from just the runners to somebody standing there. So I was trying to find it. I don't know exactly where it is. But I have a shot of the clock at Independence Hall that doesn't look anything like the clock. And it's hoots and giggles, it's fun. And I had a really good time. So,
Henry, from a workflow, where does cropping fit in for you? I have difficulties looking at the big image and then saying, okay, I think it's the middle I'm going to work with, and then process from there. And I often will do my crop toward the very beginning so I can visualize my endpoint. Where does it fit in for you?
It always comes at the end, the very, very last parts of the process. Now, that doesn't mean that I haven't cropped the image to see approximately what I want. So I'll crop it down. And the reason that I don't do a final crop is that there's been just too many times when I've got to the very end of the image and said, oh, darn, I wish I had an extra ½ an inch on the left or the right. And if I've already cropped the image, now I've got to go back and recreate it. It's a pain in the neck. And often, you know, you find yourself in a position where you have to start over again.
Yeah.
Because if you made a
I've
whole
been
bunch
there.
of changes. Yeah, so I have an idea going in where I'm gonna crop it. But I generally don't do it to the very end. And I do, I don't, I overshoot, but I generally don't overshoot terribly. I have a pretty good idea what I want my image to look like, but I give myself room on the edges. You know, and a good reason for doing that is if you're going to use any of the perspective tools to straighten lines, those are going to change the dimensions of your image. So if you go in and at the end you say, oh, I want to straighten these two vertical lines, and you've already cropped the image, you can have fairly mess things up for yourself.
Okay. Well, Henry,
Henry,
thank you. Go
Oh, what?
ahead, Jenny.
The colors of this one reminded me of the one that Barbara Kaufman did that you said you might do something to. It wasn't this type of image, but it had these colors in it. Do you
The
recall
fl-
that one?
That was the
The one with the leaves are
Refraction,
reflected.
refracted.
Which-
refracted. Yeah,
Let's-
it would have been
It was-
Class B pictorial.
Number 7. No, that was,
That was last year's images.
yeah.
Number. Oh, okay, good. Yep, thanks, Jenny. So let's just start off with the haze. What happens? Oh, there comes the reds. So right there, we're already better off. It's going to pop more. It's going to print better. And like I said, when you pull the dehaze, sometimes you have to bring the shadows back a little bit. I've got room to bring up the whites, get those to the edge, and drop the blacks down to the edge. I'm gonna probably kill the highlights just a touch. Where's my history? That's the start. That's 12 seconds later. Now, one of the things that I don't like in this is taken on a green cast that doesn't really float my boat too much. So I'd probably look at reducing the green. Green is oftentimes yellow. Let's see what happens.
Nothing.
So, yeah, let's see where. The yellow is changing as much as anything. But I'd probably look and see what I could do there, maybe something like that. When you start changing individual colors, you know, it's just different. The other thing I might look at doing on this one is cropping it. And squaring it up maybe, I don't know. I'd play with this. I kind of like that better, just off the top of my head. The other thing, I had a friend that just went and started turning images upside down. And it was amazing that so many different images can benefit from just positional changes, left or right, switch left and right, up or down. It's just kind of fun. But
Thank you.
Yeah, that's, if we got rid of the cropping, that's the start. And that's all. It's a matter of getting the contrast up to a point where people are going to notice your image. Okay. If you walk into a room of master photographers, and I'll never forget doing this. It was at the Michener Museum in Doylestown. They had an exquisite portrait exhibition by all the greats. I mean, you know, Bresson, you know, Weston stuff. But as soon as you walked into the room, it was a portrait by Ansel Adams that drew your attention. It was just boom. It was so much better. The print was so much better than anybody else's. It just drew your attention right into it. And that's your goal. If you're exhibiting your work somewhere, you want people to see it. You want people to notice it. And you need the content, you need the color, you need the presentation, the framing, all that stuff is very important. But you want people to notice your stuff. Yeah. If not, hang it in your house and do whatever you want. And that's absolutely fine. And I do want to reinforce the point about memories. Memories are really, really, really important. So not everything has to be a photograph. But when you're doing photography, as photography, the pictures don't make it.
All righty, Henry. Well, thank you so much for a fantastic evening.
Well, I hope everybody has a great holiday season, and I hope everybody starts to get together back at your building.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'll be in touch.
Okay, take care all. Thank you very much.
Good night, Henry.
Good night.
Thanks, Henry.